Hello again, it's Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. These are my favorites, Q&As. So, Gil, let's see, thank you for taking the time to make videos, blah, blah, blah. May I please ask of you to give your opinion on three handguns? The Colt 357 and the first gen Trooper double action revolver. The first gen Trooper is nothing more than the Colt Python or the 1904 Action. And although they are cool and I love that stuff, I worked on a Colt Action yesterday. It's hard, I don't always remember, but I work on them occasionally. I was called on one today, and I told the guy I don't want to work on them anymore, and I'll work on them for regular customers that have had a dozen guns with me. And we talked for a while, and I said, finally, bring it up here, let me look at it. It's got a timing problem. They're tricky, and I think I've discussed before, you do one thing to them, and it affects this, and then you do this, and it affects that. They are a problematic gun. You know, if you have them and you love them, keep them, and just enjoy them. And if you need to get something else, get something else. I'm not the kind of guy that sells something to buy something else. I'd rather just go broke. Let's see. S&W 39 and 59 double action semi-autos. The double action, the single action, I watched a lot of guys put rounds over the mountain down at the National Guard Armory. The first shot double action in a speed match, they'd be on target, and then when they came down from recoil, they'd set the gun off because it was switched to single. And so I never really understood the double to single. I know the military used them with the 92, and a lot of people like the SIG 26s and 220 this and 220 that. I'm not really an automatic guy, but if I was, I'd probably use 1911s with a consistent trigger pull and God's grip. But the 39's and 59's, years ago, I used to remove the plunger and the slide. You have to remove the safety to get it out, and that got rid of the magazine disconnect. And then there's another lever I ground the bottom part off of, so that when you put the safety on, the hammer stayed back. So you had a cock and lock situation. And when you come out of the holster with a D.A. Smith, pushing forward on that safety, that can become a very natural movement. You know, coming down on the 1911, most people do that. But, coming up and pushing forward on that safety to take the safety off, pushing it up with the hammer already back, you're in single action mode. And what people should know is all you have to do is hang on to the hammer, don't point it at your dog, and let the hammer down and put the safety on, and then you would have first shot double action and switch to single action after your first shot. So there's a lot of tricks you can do with them, but they're kind of passe. When's the last time you saw a 39? Not unless you own one. You haven't seen one in a long, long time. And the last gun you ask about is the Browning High Power. The original Belgian-made ones had a tiny safety on them, and they jacked the hammer spring up so heavy, which is the safety is the pivot for the hammer, that it made the safety hard to move. And if you drop the weight down on the hammer spring and the firing pin spring, and then I also on the teeter bar, the later ones that had the safety, I would take a couple of coils off the one that worked the safety switch in there that you have to overcome in order to pull the trigger. You can lighten them. You can take the magazine disconnect out of them. That takes a little weight off the trigger in and of itself. I bought one 1,000 years ago at Swenson's in Colorado, and on the main drag downtown, the main road going through the middle of Denver, had Swenson's, a beautiful gun shop. Wonderful. They just had everything. A lot of these guys just have, all the holsters and all the guns and back then you didn't have all plastic guns, so going through there was more like a candy store. And only Colt made AR-15s back then. No other manufacturers. And I bought a high power there and 2 or 3 extra magazines, a few boxes of ammo, a hip holster, and a shoulder rig. And I went home and I got the magazines out and I played with the gun for a while. And I was going to go, this Saturday morning, I was going to go up Route 6 and shoot it at the 3rd tunnel where people used to shoot their guns. We would go up to the third tunnel on Route 6, heading back past Golden, and shoot up there. And if there was too many, you could go to a different tunnel. There's different people shot at different tunnels. At the tunnels, the river goes around, and so that there's like an area along the freeway where you can shoot down into the river. That makes a lot of sense today, but back then it's no big deal. And I got up there. I think I went to Central City near the Glory Hole mine, and I was going to spend the night there after I shot my new Browning high power. I left the magazines in Denver, in Lakewood, and I couldn't fire the gun because it had a magazine disconnect, and I wasn't familiar with that. It was my first high power. And I can't tell you how much I hate those magazine disconnects after that little situation. So anyway, there's some information on the high power. It's a high cap. I used to do them for the Department of somebody, Drug Enforcement Division. They had them in 81, I think, and they looked up Gunsmith in the newspaper or in the phone book, and they called me, and they brought up, I don't know how many of them, a dozen of them, and I said, you can't use these Federal 115s. They won't feed. The old ramps came down and then turned like this at the bottom, and the way you fixed them is you took a drum sander band and you went against the ramp and made it straight, but it used to come down from the barrel and then turn and go down. And the 115s were short in the magazine, and they kept turning forward and diving down. And I said, instead of using the Federal ammunition, use the Remington 115s. And they had a longer point. It was a hollow point, but a longer bullet. And they managed the ramp and got in, and they said, no, we have a contract with these people, and we have to use this ammunition. I just thought, wow. Yeah, I would use the ammunition that worked. Anyway, we did solve the problem. I did straighten out the ramps and got them to work. I'd like to do something on both of those guns you mentioned there in the future. I'd love to hear your opinion on an external extractor on the 911 platform versus the original extractor design. You might want to talk to Kimber about that. They went to an external extractor. First it was 160 height, then it was 210 height. Naharabi Sarikis, their engineer, said he was going to fix all of John Browning's screw-ups, and the first one he attacked was the extractor. And he said, and he put 4 parts in there to replace the original extractor. The original extractor you can pull out, cut the donut so it moves over more, bend it back this way or bend it that way, rather, finding out whether the round goes in hard or goes in easy when you push it in. Very easy to manage. But he put in a 4-piece extractor. There was a plunger and a spring, and then there was 2 cams. One was the hook, and one was the one that put the pressure on the hook to make it work. And the first one was 160 in height, and he was saying, with the spring ratio, blah, 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 we can make this happen. And it never really worked right. They went to the 210, and then they made him change all the slides on all the guns that came back from 1 year of manufacturing and asked him to leave, I think. The other thing is the Smith & Wesson external extractor. If they would sell you an extractor, or if there was aftermarkets, that would help, but I don't think there is. A friend of mine, I don't know if he wants me mentioning him, Chuck, he's the most amazing machinist in the world. And that extractor that they put, that pivot, it sat on a pivot on the Smith & Wesson 1911, because they wanted to use the extractors they've been using all along. It didn't really have enough room back here in the hole they put in the receiver for the spring that worked it, that gave it its power. And so it didn't have a lot of travel. And so they had to give it a lot of power. So they put a spring in there that's a little strong. And Rogers looks at it with his amazing mind. And he drilled into the part itself. And so he made more room for a spring. And I think he used the plunger tube housing spring. I think he bought the Wolf, because it doesn't have the kink in it like the Colt, maybe. And then I think he put in 8 coils. But he cut into the extractor of the Smith & Wesson extractor where the spring is in the back to make more room for more spring. So now you have a larger spring being able to collapse in an area instead of a stiff spring working in a small area. And it gave travel and it gave the extractor some friendly feelings, and easy to work, and those worked. He cut several for me, but currently I just don't want to mess with it. Why get into that when you can go buy a Colt? And so I'm not much for external extractors. The original ones were so easy to work. Why not stay with them? And I'm going to jump to a guy that talks about a Colt national match. I did notice there was slide the frame movement at the rear. This is a brand new gun. Shoots great. What do you think? Common with Colts. My Springfield range operator is tighter with 2,200 rounds through it. You could take the slide off of one Gold Cup or national match and put it on another. They're all going to be a little different, and they don't have the kind of final fitting they didn't originally, or the kind of machine work that they do today, programmables. Their new ones, they're called trophies. They are made so well today, they can butt up at just about anything in the business. And they have hammer forged barrels, and they have proper sears, disconnects. I don't even hate going over it because, people can buy what they want. I'll buy Colts with 45 years of working on them. And you're looking at a guy that stepped on a range before where there was an IPSC match going on, 150 shooters, and 70 of them were using guns that I had set the trigger pulls on. And so I'm not guessing on one gun or another gun. I take 12 to 15 guns out to the range every week to make sure they work. My brain has been scrambled by all this, and I've gone over all this stuff 10,000 times. I know there's really sharp guys out there, but Colt makes the best 45s. You ought to see the new ones, the new trophies with the 25 lines. I think it's 25 lines Prince checkering. They're stunning, and they're $1,400. I have a model 15.3. I can't get the middle side plate screw out. Any advice? God loves you. He froze that screw in there for a reason. How often should I take off my side plate and internal parts out for cleaning? I shot 6 years at the National Guard Armory, over 300 matches with a K38 Masterpiece from the early 50s. I never took the side plate off. Didn't need to. Gun worked. And I was just drilling rounds through it. The matches were 50 and 75 rounds. And I practiced on the weekends. And all I do, if it felt gunky, I just cocked the hammer back and I'd spray oil down in there, work the action, cock the hammer back with the grips off, and hit my 125 pound air gun in there and up through the grips and like that. I didn't have the time to take my own guns apart. And if you keep them oiled and you're fine, you don't have to take them apart. I can't discuss what just happened with a customer of mine. I just don't know why he had to take his gun apart, but he caused a lot of problems yesterday for himself. But taking it apart, people break pivot pins, they lose parts, they cause problems. The worst thing they do is they buff the hammer and trigger where they contact each other for a better single action pull. Doesn't happen. Knock coils off your trigger return spring. But you don't need anything less than 3 pounds. Colt Mark III actions all have problems. Should I dump them? You can. I have sold guns in the past, but I'm not big on selling stuff. I don't know what to tell you. The Colt Mark III action is the same as the Anaconda, the Viper, the King Cobra, and I don't know what else they make today. But they have a coil spring on the shaft behind the hammer and a pig's tail spring that works the trigger. And I think finally they put a Smith & Wesson cylinder stop in them. But if you saw the way they lay their hand and their transfer bar in there with the horsehair springs, just getting them all to stay in there when you put the side plate on is ridiculous. You mentioned that when you travel, you have a high cap handgun. I'm not a big fan of polymer, but when they say Nelson Ford, we need to take your gun you've been in a shooting, I can hand them a Model 43X that I paid $400 for and say, here, it's yours. I have Model 19s that I carry with me as well when I travel with 33 round magazines. When you're far from home, that's all you got, that and water and your good sense. But I like the Glock because it's been around longer than anybody, and it solved a lot of its own problems. A lot of people haven't been around long enough to remember all the problems, but they recalled 400,000 of them, and they had cracked barrels, and they had broken trigger pivot pins. I remember Glenn told me, he was the armorer down at Shooter's World shooting range. He told me, we can't keep a gun on the range. They had 6 rentals, and the trigger pivot pins kept breaking. But they fixed that, and they fixed, what were the other problems? They would fire upon dropping, and they had all these different problems, but they had 14 different problems, and there was an article in like Guns and Ammo or something, the dark days of the Glock, and people that buy them today don't know anything about it because they weren't even born yet. But those guns had terrible problems, and they worked them all out, and they're wonderful guns. And I don't do anything to them. I don't put flashlights on them. I don't adjust triggers. I don't change anything. I don't even know how to take the parts out of the slide. All I know is you buy them for $300-400 and they work. And so they're not steam trains. They're not Cadillacs. They're not Colt Peacemakers. They're not really cool. They're not 67 GTOs with a tri-power on it. They're not real cool, but they do the job. That's all they do. They do the job. And you pick up one and it's the same as the next one. And nobody really cares much about them. I guess there's a big deal about the Gen 1s now because they didn't have finger grooves or something, and they're really expensive now. And I think that's exciting. I really do. I think it's cool that there's something collectible about them. But to me, they're just modern hardware like the silverware in my drawer. I don't think much about it. I just take them out and use them. Let's see what else we have here. I'd love to hear your opinion on the newer Springfields. They use a sleeved barrel on their 1911s. I've seen the sleeves break loose. I've seen the lugs break loose. I think they come from Brazil. Springfield is one of the oldest names in American firearms. They made flintlocks. They made, cap and balls. They outfitted the U.S. military and the cavalry, and they made the M1A. They've done 1,000 things, but they're not the sort of high quality gun that Colt is. Their sear springs are terrible. Their sears are terrible. And they don't have a lot of stainless parts. Like their slide releases and safeties and hammers are all nickel flashed or some sort of flashing on them. They're really carbon steel, and the hammers crack and break in half. The slide stops can lose that little piece in there that sticks through the frame that the magazine hits. They're not the same as the Colts. It's okay. Colt's not paying me anything. My dad used to say, you don't have to worry about what Nelson's thinking. He'll always tell you. And I don't know whether it's a fault or a plus, but I'll always tell you what I think. If you have one, enjoy it. If it works for you, enjoy it. They're all good. Fall in love with it. Make it your friend. Though they can work. They can work just fine. But don't compare them to my Colts. Hey Nelson, I have a S&W 66 no dash 4-inch barrel. I know I should limit magnum rounds. I wouldn't shoot any, especially in a no dash. 38's special or plus P loads to avoid. This is a range gun. Just shoot range ammunition in it. Why would you shoot plus P's in a range gun? Plus P's utilize ball powder, and ball powder burns forcing cones. H110, 296, and 630. All forcing cone burners. If you're buying an L frame and you want to beat it up, that's one thing. A no-dash 66, I can't follow that thinking. I would just use range ammo in it. I'd like to thank you for watching my Q&As. Keep the questions and comments coming. I have a blast with them. So have a nice night.